はい。それでは、セミナーを開催いたします。この後の進行は知事にお願いいたします。
はい。タン大臣、聞こえますでしょうか？
はい。Yes, I hear you perfect.
はじめまして、宮崎県知事の河野と申します。本日は大変お忙しい中、このセミナーにオンラインでご参加をいただきましたことに心から感謝を申し上げます。尊敬するタン大臣に直接このようにお話ができる機会、大変ありがたく思っております。今日この宮崎県の会場には、高校生や大学生、若手経営者など18名も参加をしているところであります。その意味におきまして、今日のこのセミナーは3つの目的があります。本県の将来ビジョンをですね、考えるということ。それから2つ目には、大臣も大変重視しておられます、時代を担う若い世代への刺激をいただくということ。そして台湾と宮崎の交流をさらに深めていくということであります。今日このセミナーの開催にあたりましては、福岡にあります経済交流弁事所の陳明春所長にも大変ご配慮をいただいたところであります。タン大臣、また台湾政府の皆様に重ねて感謝を申し上げます。それでは、まず大臣からスピーチをお願いいたします。
Thank you. It is my great honor to be here virtually at this meeting. I look very much forward to visit in person, and I must begin my speech by acknowledging my deep gratitude to the Japanese people and Japanese government for donating the AstraZeneca shots. I received personally the shots from Japan that enabled me to travel worldwide. And as the Omicron variant is being tackled around the world, in Taiwan, we're now seeing for the second time this week, zero COVID in the Omicron variant. So we have again successfully squashed the virus around here. And I do believe that this common urgency that's shared not just by Japanese people and Taiwanese people, but by everyone around the world will create a neighborhood that feels much closer. Even though we're now across the screen, we have the same experiences in the past couple of years. And to that end, I will begin my remark by noting two things that I believe are very important for Taiwan's story of squashing the Omicron variant, and both have some connections to the input from the young people of youth engagement. As Taiwan's Digital Minister in charge for social innovation and youth engagement, we firmly believe that it is the most important for us, for the young people, to set the trend, to point out what is going to happen, to ensure that those emerging trends that might be missed by people in the cabinet, including me, are pointed out in a very quick fashion. Indeed, some of the familiar examples from Taiwan, for example, noting that there were SARS-like cases in Wuhan in 2019. That was from a young doctor, not even 30 years old. The invention of the mask rationing visualization map, again, from civic technologist in the Tainan city, who's not even 35 years old. So very young people in charge of these early important measures. Now, last year, in May, when we noted the Alpha variant is much more viral than the previous original variant of the new COVID virus, what we have noticed is that we need really to get everyone into the habit of working with contact tracing without sacrificing any privacy. This is actually a very difficult social problem, because if we rely on new technologies like Bluetooth or some advanced apps, it's very unlikely that the senior people or the people who are very young will be comfortable with those new technologies. On the other hand, if we do not use phones or technologies and rely only on handwriting or stamping, it is also almost impossible to do contact tracing as quick as the Alpha variant, not to mention the Omicron variant. So we need something that is both inclusive, taking care of the senior and very junior people in both urban and rural areas, but also accountable, meaning that it can respond to the contact tracing needs, including privacy concerns in a way that is convincing to everyone. So everyone can feel safer, but the contact tracing people can work faster. So the innovation, it turns out, takes two branches. One is the use of SMS. Because the elderly people, many of them have phones, but not necessarily smartphones. Even if they have the smartphone, not necessarily they will install apps on it. But if we print out a random code, 15 digits of random code in each and every venue, and for every venue owner to self-service print that on their front door, then the elderly people, it is possible for them to look at those 15 digits and manually send an SMS to the same number, 1922, which is the toll-free number for everything related to epidemic control. So by working on a previous generation of technology, ones that the elderly people were familiar with when they were relatively young, right? People who had a lot of experience on SMS, they understand how it works and they trust the telephone companies reasonably, and the telephone companies doesn't really know what venue those 15 random digits correspond to. Because it's individually easy to explain, we gain a lot more adoption in the rural areas and for the elderly people. On the other hand, we never say that you cannot use paper. And people also innovated. My own grandma, around 90 years old, never carries a phone, not even a feature phone with her. And so she can actually use a seal, right? A wooden block with her name and contact number on it. And she would stamp every time she enters a venue. And that is also very quick and almost contact free because the seal carries its own ink. So what I'm trying to say is that inclusive innovation takes care of the innovation that is empowering the people closest to the pain. Every time we introduce a new digitalization measure, it should empower people to connect with each other more. It should never take away existing innovations or upcoming innovations. But whichever way, it could be stamping. The Line company, for example, also added a new feature last June in response to our SMS-based contact tracing. So even though Line is not a Taiwanese company, their developers in Taiwan work with the developers in Japan to create Line's feature to support this QR code-based contact tracing. And because a lot of senior people in Taiwan use Line very regularly, so then they don't have to learn anything or download any new app. So without closing off emergent innovations, everything is mutually accountable, and everyone can, if they have any doubt that who is accessing their records and so on, there is a dedicated website, sms.1922.gov.tw, that shows exactly which contact tracing people in which municipality or in which town have accessed your checking record for what purpose in the past 28 days. And it shows exactly how many messages are deleted after 28 days. So this is what I mean by mutual accountability. I believe this is a model, inclusive accountability. It is a model that ensures a plurality of innovations so that any corner in Taiwan, the very young people can work in a way that's a positive sum, hand in hand, across generations. The young people can innovate to include their own grandmothers of around 90 years old into the latest digital services instead of a top-down way of a one-size-fits-all way, which will necessarily create a zero-sum, almost competing relationship across generations. So I believe inclusive accountability is the key to the regional innovations to spread in the countrywide fashion and make the social solidarity stronger so that we can even squash the Omicron variant. Of course, there are many other more examples, but I would prefer to say that responding to the questions. And so that is my opening remark. Thank you.
はい、丹大臣、ありがとうございました。 デジタル技術を活用しながら、コロナ対応も含めてですね、若い世代の能力を活用し、そしてインクルーシブなイノベーションを進めていくこと、大いにヒントをいただいたように思います。それでは時間も限られておりますので、これから会場におりますものとの質疑応答に移らせていただきたいと思います。まず私から2点お伺いをしたいと思います。大臣のこれまでの役割、心から尊敬をしながら、そして、大臣が就任をされて仕事をされている状況がですね、やはり、そうですね、多くのアイデアやリソースを持った方をいかに結びつけて、新しいものをクリエイトしていくかという、まさにそういう、プロデューサー、ハブのような役割を果たしておられるなという、大変、素晴らしいことだというふうに思います。大臣が就任されるにあたって、3つの条件ですね。一つ、フラットな立場からアドバイスをするというようなことで、就任をされたというふうに伺っておりますが、大臣が仕事をされる上で、素晴らしいアイデアを作られたり、そこはよくわかるんですが、その上で、いろんな障害にぶつかることはないだろうかということで、2つの障害ですね。政治的な面という面での課題というものに直面されたことはないでしょうか。いろんな失敗というものは早く、それから公に、徹底した透明性で何度も失敗することが成功につながるということではありますが、その初期の段階の失敗を政治的に問われたり、また場合によっては政治勢力というものは、変化を嫌ったりというようなこともありましてですね、そのようなところでの障害を感じられたことはないだろうかというのが1点目。もう一つは、インターネット。これは大臣もおっしゃっておりますように、もう今の時代の人権であるということであろうかと思いますが、大変重要なものであり、そこに大きなパワーがあるわけですが、一面リスク、自由であるからこその排他性、攻撃性、さらなる脆弱性ということもあるんではないかというふうに考えております。この2点で、いろいろ課題に直面されたことはないのか、そしてそれを克服されることがあればですね、ヒントをいただければと思っております。
Thank you. These are all extremely good questions. Each one would take easily an entire day of seminar conference to answer, but I will try to be short. The first question about a culture that accepts failure. I think there are two kinds of failure. The first kind is that a failure that can only be remedied, fixed by a few people. And the second kind is the failure that can be remedied or fixed by anyone. The first type of failure is very hard to admit because if one admits that without a good solution, one looks very bad. But the second kind is okay to admit all the time. I will use one example. As you know, in 2020 in Taiwan, we rationed out the masks. Every time that people queue in line to get some mask from pharmacies, every week they could get maybe 2 or 3 medical grade masks in the beginning. However, we incorrectly assumed that the pharmacies align perfectly with population centers. We have a model that showed each average citizen in Taiwan have an average probably the same distance to the pharmacy nearby because we think it's fair, so we distribute based on the location of pharmacies initially. However, because everyone can see which pharmacy received which mask and how those inventories depletes over time, it's updated every 30 seconds, called Open API. More than 100 different maps, chatbots, and so on, developers. It's like a distributed ledger that lets everyone see the real-time inventory in all the 6,000 and more pharmacies. So people in the OpenStreetMap community very quickly discover that there is a bias because not everyone owns a helicopter. The same distance on the map means nothing. People in the rural areas who rely on public transportation may take 3 hours to reach a pharmacy that looks on the map the same distance when they connect better to the urban areas. So the initial distribution is wrong. It was a failure. But because of the real-time inventory is published for everyone, there's no review or censorship from the central government. So when the opposition party's member of parliament asked the Ministry of Health and Welfare, the minister simply said, yeah, the analysis is correct, and legislator, please teach us how to make it better. Because after all, everyone has the same evidence, everyone has the same data. So the people who point out the bias is now having the responsibility also to come up with better suggestions. And we did get better suggestions around pre-registration, around use of convenience stores, which opens 24 hours and so on, which was implemented the next day. So anyone who discover anything wrong can actually propose something better because they have the same real-time data. And we simply say, yeah, legislator, you are right. And your idea is great. And 24 hours later, your idea becomes the national policy. And it makes accepting failures not as failures, but as pivot. It's like running a startup. We just pivot to a different strategy. Now, the second question about anonymity on the internet. Indeed, we have seen anonymity as very important for people in power imbalance to blow a whistle, for example, or to uncover something that is actually happening. On the other hand, it creates the possibility for one person to masquerade as 5,000 people and create a bullying situation, but there's actually no such representativeness. So I think pseudonymity is not the same as the ability to create 5,000 fake accounts. We should introduce mechanisms to prevent the creation of those fake accounts when we set up public squares, civic infrastructures on the internet, like a town hall, right? So in Taiwan, when we have a digital town hall on the Join, Join platform, people are authenticated using their phone number and with SMS, and the phone number needs to be issued by one of the telecom carriers in Taiwan, not overseas. And so because of that, it's very difficult actually for a citizen to get 5,000 SIM cards. The anti-money laundering service will discover that. And so because of that, we retain some sort of anonymity, but without the way to create fake accounts. I hope that answers your question.
はい、ありがとうございます。透明性、スピード感、そして、公開性、そういったところでヒントをいただきました。ありがとうございます。それでは、ここからは若い世代からの質問をお受けいただければと思います。まず、高校生、どうでしょうか。はい。では、どうぞ。はい。
Hello, nice to meet you. My name is Hinako Fukushima, and I'm a Miyazaki Omiya High School student. We are studying about world's problems and making the solution for them. I want to do something for the world. So, what do you think even high school students can do?
Thank you. Was that the question about how high school students can contribute to the world?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. When I started my first startup, I was a high school student. I was 15 years old. I dropped out of the middle school to contribute to the world. So I firmly believe the capacity of high school students when I was middle high. I firmly believe that the lack of bound experience to how things should be solved of business as usual is in fact the creativity that is innate in the middle high school students to contribute to the world. So the fresh perspective is a contribution. In Taiwan, when we introduced the Join platform of SMS authentication, we do not put an age limit on it. And even people who are 16, 17, they are very active. Actually, they are the most active on the Join platform, even before they turn 18. So we have many very innovative proposals. Some of them correspond to their own life. For example, there's a very popular proposal that says the class should begin at a later day in the morning instead of asking all the students to come very early to the school, because if you don't sleep enough, you don't remember anything you learned yesterday anyway. So sufficient sleep should be very important. And that is very popular, got a lot of signatures, and we turned that into actual policy a couple weeks ago. So it's a very successful petition. But some of them does not concern just the young people. For example, there was a proposal that said our signature drink, the bubble tea, creates a lot of plastic waste because the takeouts always give you a plastic straw, even if you don't ask for it. And so the petition says that we need to use reusable cups and straws, or we must make it from biodegradable material and so on. Obviously, it's not just for the young people, but the young people do not already have a habit of plastic straws. So the proposer is actually just turned 17 when she proposed that thing. And again, she gained thousands and thousands of support, this time from 60 years old and 70 years old who care a lot about the environment, and they successfully changed the regulation for our Environmental Protection Administration so that the plastic straws are now essentially banned from the major takeout venues on bubble tea, and there's a thriving economy on reusable straws and packaging materials and other circular economy things. So I do believe that if there are digital public infrastructures, the very old and the very young, because they both care about many generations down the line, and let's be honest, they have more time on their hands. It's very essential for those two generations to work together on matters concerning sustainability. I hope that answers your question.
はい、ありがとうございました。宮崎でも若い皆さんの声を、そうですね、取り入れる仕組みを作らなきゃなと思いました。朝課外がなくなるかもしれませんね。はい。まず最初、それぞれのグループ、カテゴリーから一人ずつお話をいただければと思いますので、次は大学生グループ、どなたかお願いできますでしょうか。はい。では、今手を挙げられた。
日本語で話します。南九州大学の内田常生と申します。大学では食品安全について研究を行っています。私の所属する大学では、2021年からスラックというコミュニケーションツールを全教職員、全学年に導入いたしました。私も学生アンバサダーのリーダーに選ばれておりまして、使ってみたところものすごく面白いツールだと思っています。そこで質問なんですけど、大臣はこのスラックのようなコミュニケーションツールというのは使っているのでしょうか？で、あと、このデジタルトランスフォーメーションが叫ばれる中で、僕らのような学生もいち早くそのようなツールに慣れておくべきかということを聞きたいです。
Thank you. So I am digital minister in charge of social innovation. So I'm both using Slack in the G0V or Gov0 community. Join the G0V.tw is the civil society's answer to join the GOV.tw, which is the public sector. So I wear two hats. In my social sector activist hat, I use Slack all the time. In fact, if you go to join the G0V.tw, it's a self-service Slack registration service. And we have tens of thousands of people on the G0V Slack channel. And for the COVID innovations, including the SMS-based contact tracing and the mask map, both innovations are created on that Slack channel with around 1,000 people participating. So I would say that's definitely where innovation happens on the social sector. Now, for the public servants, my other hat in the government sector, we do not use Slack, but we use something similar. We use Rocket Chat. And not only we use Rocket Chat, we fork, that is to say, make our own version of Rocket Chat. that runs entirely in the intranet, that runs entirely on government premises, that have our own cybersecurity parameter and audits and so on. Because after all, we do not want to be reliant on a single vendor who is a subscription model. So we search for free software equivalents of Slack. And there are many, but Rocket Chat is easy to change, easy to adapt. So we used Rocket Chat. But the use of free software carries its own responsibilities. We have to do the translation, a lot of translation ourselves. So we have to maintain the uptime, the operational stability of that, and so on. So I'm not saying that everyone in every level of government should maintain their own Slack-like variant, but it's important to have this choice, because if the term of service of Slack changes, then you at least have something to fall back to instead of being held captive. So I think it's important to learn the use of search engines, but whether you prefer Google or not is your choice. It's important to learn about group collaboration, but whether you use, I don't know, Discord or Slack or Rocket Chat, that's your choice. It's important to learn collaborative spreadsheets, but whether you use EtherCalc, which I maintain, or a Sandstorm or Google Spreadsheet, that's your choice, and so on and so forth. I hope that answers your question.
ありがとうございました。